Appreciate it. Thank you. How are you in your office, or are you up in the on the floor?
I'm in the finance committee conference room.
Oh, okay. Do you think there'll be a big show up on the floor, or is it all gonna be Zoom?
I don't think so. I think that when people are presented the opportunity, they prefer to just tune in from home. And if they're not looking to ask any questions, they can just watch on TV. So, but you know, we're eventually going to have to come back into in-person meetings unless the legislature, changes the open meeting law again. But that expires in July. So
Are we still planning for open meeting on Saturday?
we are.
Good.
Today was the first time in my life that I looked at an 80-degree forecast on a Saturday and was upset about it.
Well, you're gonna get busy, so I'm gonna go back on mute.
All
Nice
right.
to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna wait until 6:35 to really get started.
All right, I'm going on mute.
Okay. Hi, Tom. How's it going?
Good, good.
I'm just giving it a couple more minutes here before I get started.
Yeah,
You in the office?
I'm in the office. Yeah, yeah. Do you want me to cut the video or you want to keep the video on?
I mean, you could cut it. I think wait until, hey, what's going on? I would say wait until,
If there's a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's any questions, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, I just don't want to take up bandwidth for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Dan Script.
Hi.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good, good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is the second info session for annual town meeting that is happening this Saturday, May 21st. It will start at 12:30 here in the town hall. A couple folks are here in the room. We were just talking about COVID cases and the recent increase in cases. We will have plenty of masks available here at the town hall for folks. We still haven't really announced whether it'll be required or not, but certainly highly, highly encouraged. And, taking your mask off while you speak at the microphone, or, if it looks like it's going to be a hot day, so taking your mask down, because you're getting hot or something like that. We're not going to, enforce the rule very extremely hard on folks, but, certainly with the contagiousness of the current, strain of COVID, calls for being a little extra careful in a group setting like this. So we will have, plenty of air circulation. We'll have fans going and air purifiers, and try to make the spaces as safe as possible. So what I'm going to do here is share my screen. This is, like I said, this is the second informational session. If at any point you'd like to come off of mute, I am sharing my screen, so the chat, I may not catch something in the chat during the presentation, but feel free to jump off of mute, interrupt me, ask any questions you'd like. I really try to make this as informal as possible, so that people can learn about the process, learn about what they're going to be talking about the day of town meeting. And I've invited Tom Simbro from Wright Pierce, the project manager and engineer for our sewer infrastructure, which is a big article number 17 regarding the $18 million borrowing. So if anyone has any technical questions or comments, or wants to hear a little bit more about that, Tom is on the call. And I also have Amy Rutledge from Dubois and King, our stormwater engineer firm. She is the project manager for the lowland stormwater solutions assessment, which is funded by last year's town meeting article, and is helping guide us towards or as part of this year's Article 30, which is funding to implement the solutions discovered by that stormwater engineer firm. So let's get started. As I mentioned, town meeting is on Saturday at 12:30 here in the town hall. This is actually, I think this is going to be our first May annual town meeting here in the town hall. We've changed the date, the annual town meeting date, to be the third Saturday in May a couple years ago. And since then, we've been outside because of COVID. So this is our first annual town meeting in May back in the town hall. And check-in will start at 11:30 a.m. I also have been asked to put a plug in for the Friends of Council on Aging, who will bring back the tradition of selling hot dogs downstairs. So, bring cash if you're going to be hungry. They will be selling hot dogs downstairs at the town hall during the meeting. So I want to start by giving an overview of how we prepare for annual town meeting. This process starts way back in December. When we start putting together our omnibus budget and start seeking requests from our department heads In January, dictated by the town charter, citizen petitions and committee requests for warrant articles are due by January 31st. And then January through April, there are multiple committees and people and electeds and, a number of different things going on. And it starts, with the Community Preservation Committee, puts out their applications, starts reviewing applications that they receive, and through that 3-month period, makes their awards and recommendations, eventually putting together their sub-articles and sending those to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Same time frame, the Board of Selectmen are building the draft omnibus budget, which we send to the Finance Committee for them to review and develop their own omnibus budget. And then we're also developing the warrant. And throughout January to April, we make changes, we approve them, we send the warrant to the Finance Committee, who then puts their recommendations and include it in the book that this book here that's available online on nahant.org and should be, at your doorsteps by now. And the Advisory and Finance Committee develop the final omnibus budget, and they make their recommendations on the warrant articles. So, many people may or may not know that the omnibus budget voted on at town meeting is actually the Finance Committee's document. So the Board of Selectmen and I and the town accountant develop an omnibus budget. We draft it, we send it to the Finance Committee, but ultimately the Finance Committee are empowered by the charter to develop the omnibus budget that the town meeting votes on. The warrant, however, is controlled by the selectmen. So every other article included in there is actually, decided by the selectmen, unless, of course, a timely a timely citizen petition or committee request is submitted. The board has, on a citizen petition, we have or a committee request, the Board of Selectmen have no discretion on the language. What's submitted is what gets added to the warrant. There's no changing any of the language of that article. Whereas the articles that the selectmen add to the warrant throughout the January through April process, they can open the warrant, make some edits and changes, change the order by which they're heard on the day of town meeting, those sorts of things. And then when they finalize it, they send it to the FinCom for recommendations. And then, as I mentioned in May, the report and recommendations of the Finance Committee is delivered to the household of every registered voter in Nahant. So May, this Saturday is, that last leg of a very long process of, many people spending, countless number of hours of their own time, in night meetings and putting together, these documents and for you, the town meeting, the registered voters of the town to discuss and vote on. So a little bit more about the omnibus budget. We build our budget, as I mentioned, we start back in the end of, last calendar year. When we're putting together the town's omnibus budget, we start by looking at what are the revenues that we predict to come in for next year. So, the budget we vote on Saturday is for the upcoming fiscal year that starts July 1 and runs until June 30th of 2023. So when we're deciding how are we going to spend for that fiscal year, we first start with, well, how much money are we going to have to spend? And not all revenue is the same. Some revenue, our most confident revenue stream is property taxes. Because of Proposition 2.5, the state law, we are not allowed as a town to increase the total amount of revenue from property taxes by more than 2.5% over last year. So our biggest revenue stream is capped at 2.5% because of state law. So it limits us on how much we can grow our expenditures. We really want to make sure that we're spending, that money on annual expenses, whether that be payroll, employee benefits, contractual obligations, assessments, things of that nature. I'll explain that as I keep going through here. And then we're also looking at the other revenues, which is, local receipts. So when you buy a mooring fee or a parking sticker, when any local meals tax, any state aid from the state, all those other revenues come into the equation. So once we figure out, okay, here's how much we have to spend this year, we start putting together our priorities. As I mentioned, we ask our department heads for their capital requests and their budget requests, and we start putting together the budget. The number one priority for our town when developing our budget is debt service. So the first thing we look at is how much debt are we going to owe next year? And whatever that dollar amount is, we program that into the budget first. We have the next piece there, stabilization. That's our rainy day account or our savings account, in other words. So we have an agreement. We've developed policies with the finance committee back in 2018 that we would prioritize investing in the stabilization account. One, to build up those reserves. Two, that account has an impact on the town's bond rating. So no different than your personal credit score, our bond rating basically tells banks what we could get for an interest rate. So when we go, the better our bond rating or the better your credit score, when you go get a loan, the better interest rate you're going to get. So same thing here. Our agreement with the FinCom is that we put a minimum of $100,000 in the stabilization on an annual basis. So we put that into the budget. Our other post-employment benefits, or OPEB, is the same. What that is costs of benefits to retirees, which the town's obligated to pay. So again, our agreement with the FinCom is $25,000 per year. So we program that into the budget. We look at contractual obligations. So what are our employee contracts, our union contracts, any type of service contracts like waste management? What are we going to owe this upcoming year? We program that in. We look at assessments. So for school like Swampscott or Essex Tech, we look at water and sewer, which is MWRA and Lynn Water Sewer. We find out how much are we going to owe them. We program that into the budget. We look at free cash. We look at free cash in a unique way because free cash is different every single year. The amount of free cash that we have as a revenue stream changes on an annual basis. Essentially, what free cash is looking at a previous fiscal year. How much more money did you bring in revenues than you predicted? Plus, how much less money did you spend that you planned on spending? Those two numbers come together to be authorized by the DOR to roll over into a future fiscal year. So we made more money than we thought, and we spent less money than we thought. The combination of those two differences ends up being given to us for a future year. I look at it like a Christmas bonus. You don't know how much you're going to get on an annual basis. So you're not going to take that Christmas bonus and buy something that's going to cost you, $10,000 a year. But if you got a $10,000 Christmas bonus, which congratulations, you might, buy a one-time thing. You might pay off a credit card. You may put some money in your savings account. You might plan a vacation, but it's a defined amount. You're going to spend it in that given period. You don't know if you'll get 10 grand again the next year. So you don't want to hire another person that's going to cost you X amount of dollars on an annual basis with free cash. So that's how we look at it. So how much free cash are we getting? Now we're going to take that and we're going to look back at the capital requests that our department heads have given us. We're going to say, what can we pay for with this free cash? And we'll go back to, after we have everything else budgeted in the omnibus, and we have some leftover funds, we'll come back to this priority list and we will invest more than the minimum in debt, in stabilization, or other items like that. Any questions? So the slide before kind of gave you the 10,000 foot perspective. This slide shows you how we applied those principles. So, all this information is available on the website, so you don't have to, write it down or read, intensely right now. But as I mentioned, our 98% of our revenue comes from property taxes, and it's capped at 2.5%. So your, guidance from Division of Local Services is that your salaries and general operating expenses stay within 2.5% to 3.5% over last year. This budget that we've put together that you're going to vote on Saturday represents a 2.9% increase. So very, very cautious, conservative spending plan on those reoccurring expenses. And it equals $278,255 more in those same items compared to last year. You'll see here a couple of decreases. The $62,108 in cultural recreation is largely due to the anticipation of spending less on Coast Guard housing because of last year's town meeting vote. Residents will be vacating the property in September. There won't be costs of upkeep any longer. They'll actually be transitioning into following the plan voted on by town meeting. And then in water and sewer enterprise, $130,000 decrease, largely because last year, Lynn Water and Sewer was negotiating a new operating and maintenance contract and was expecting a significant increase in that annual assessment, which we had originally programmed last year. But during this current fiscal year that we're in, they signed the new agreement and ended up being not as much of an increase as expected. So we actually will see a decrease in the upcoming fiscal year as to what we'll spend on Lynn Water Sewer. And we are actually going to try to incorporate some of those savings into your third billing cycle for sewer in the current fiscal year. So that's good news. As I said, appropriately using free cash. So spending that money appropriately towards one-time purchases and things of that nature. This year, our free cash amount was very high compared to previous years because we actually used a lot of COVID funds during the fiscal year last year on expenses. And then the following year, and then now in the current year, we have new funding that is here that we're able to use in this budget to pay down some of those expenditures. So we have a large amount of free cash but it's not expected to be that high, 1.5 million year after year. It'll be half that or maybe even less year after year. So we are utilizing that to, number one, increase the amount of money that we put into stabilization. As I mentioned on the last slide, we agreed to do $100,000 a year. This year, we're putting $250,000, which is a huge investment, but that actually puts our total of the stabilization fund to $669,849, which is about 5% of our budget, which is the recommended amount by DOR. So when in 2018, when we made this goal of 100,000 a year, there was only about $100,000, a little bit less than $100,000 in the account. Now, just a few years later, we've already met our goal with this year's large investment. So that's a very positive story for us. Also, we'll continue to do the 25,000 into OPEB. That account in 2018 only had about $3,000 in it, and now it's up to 103. So we've put 25,000 in every year, and paying down extra in debt. So our minimum debt appropriation what is about $325,000 less than what we're going to spend on debt this year. So what we look at is those outstanding bonds or loans that we have, the ones with the highest interest rate, no different than if you had 5 credit cards, you want to pay down the one with the highest interest rate first. That's what we look at. And we have this surplus of free cash this year. Let's pay down some of that high interest debt.
Hey, Tony, Jane.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, that's great information. And I'm just curious, will you have any kind of a condensed version of that to open up the meeting?
On Saturday?
Yes.
I will be available to answer questions during the Omnibus Budget article. That is the longest motion that we read that day. So
Right.
I'll let the Finance Committee read the motion and then I'll be available to answer any questions. Like I said, this is on the website. But you know, the highlights, yeah, I mean, if I were to try to sum it up, it'd be that, you know, we're only spending another $278,000 over what we spent last year on those annual expenses. We're putting $250,000 into stabilization, bringing our account to 700, 5% of our total budget. And we're spending extra money on debt and we're investing that free cash appropriately, 100% appropriate based on state guidance. So,
That should work.
that's my short story.
Okay, thanks.
So now what I'll do is go into some of the articles. You know, there's a ton of important articles in the warrant. I tried to break this. I tried to like focus on some of the more important, not more important, but the larger articles that might be a little bit more confusing and, you know, are very impactful to our community. So I'll go through a few of them, but like I said, at any point, now or at the end, if there's something you want to talk about, feel free to jump in. But this article here, 17, and Tom Simbro from Wright Pierce is on the call if anyone has any questions. This article is to fund this article is to authorize the town to borrow $18 million through the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust State Revolving Fund. That program offers long-term, low interest rates for communities, specifically for sewer infrastructure. We're utilizing it now for the Linway project. The way that the program works is, and how we're doing it right now with Linway is, as we get invoiced from the contractor, we pay those bills, and then we submit them for reimbursement from the state. And at the end of the project, the bond is issued. So it's similar to a construction loan. You don't borrow all the money up front. The money only gets bonded once the project is completed. That's important information because, if this article were to pass the day of town meeting, it doesn't mean that the town is borrowing $18 million immediately and that we're going to have to pay that debt down immediately. It's essentially setting up the town for what I think is the next 10 years based on this capital plan that Wright Pierce has helped us develop. The reason it's important for us, the reason why we are coming to the town for the 18 million now, instead of, coming to the town for 5 million, and then in a couple of years come back for another 3, and then in a couple of years come back for another 3, and then another, 8.5 at the end, is because we were just awarded 16,700,000 by DEP in their intended use plan, through this project. So the concern is that if we don't get authorization from town meeting, that that award will be taken away from us. The DEP has said that they got more applications for this program than they ever had before, and tenfold. So there's a ton of communities trying to get into this program, and we were lucky enough to be awarded. So a positive, passage of this article, we can tell DEP, the town's authorized us to go ahead with this borrowing, and here's how we plan to do it over the next 5 to 10 years.
Question,
So-
Tony?
Yes.
That's a line of credit usually has a commitment fee for the unused portion. This is without commitment fee?
Correct.
That's a great deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that that DEP is going to ask us for our, capital plan. They know what we're spending this money on, what the time frame of it is, what, they'll start to get, they know it generally, like I'm showing here, but they will want a little bit more information and detail about how we're going to approach that and when. And if we aren't staying up to date with them and showing them progress and explaining to them how we're going through these steps, they could take some of our award away and give it to another community that's ready to build right now. What I have listed here on this, chart are the 4 projects that we applied for the funding to DEP that we listed in our application. What's not on this chart is the Linway portion of the force main, which is currently being constructed. That was definitely the #1 priority for our town. Now our #1 priority after the Linway portion of the force main project is completed is the Ward Road pump station. Tom Simbro, Wright Pierce, conducted an assessment. They are conservatively estimating a high number of $5.3 million, mostly because the supply chain issues, everything is so in flux right now. They wanted to make sure that we, expected high, and if it ends up coming in less than that, all the better. But essentially they went in and looked at the Ward Road pump station. They assessed the condition of every single, nook and cranny of that building. Every component from, the light switch to the main pump, to the HVAC system, to the roof, to the computer system, everything you can think of. So, The way that Tom put it to me is, fortunately, we've gotten about 40-something years out of the system, out of the Ward Road pump station. Unfortunately, the lifespan of it is 25. So we are, we're getting everything out of it. We've been band-aiding it for quite some time, but it really needs to be overhauled. And so that project would be our first priority. And based on design, bid, and construction schedule, the debt service wouldn't start until fiscal year 25. So 2 fiscal years from now would be the first year that we start paying debt on that project. The next project is the Willow Road Force Main. So that's the pipe that goes from the wharf down Willow Road, past Tudor to the golf course, and then turns into gravity to the Ward Road pump station. That force main is actually in a similar situation as the pump station, where it's far exceeded its expected life, and in need of replacement. Gravity II is all the gravity pipes. So all the pipes that come from every house that flow into a force main, eventually to Ward Road, and eventually out to Lynn. All those gravity pipes, DEP is requiring every town to make improvements regarding II, which II stands for inflow and inundation, and basically
Infiltration.
and basically what it is either illicit connections, so some pumps going into the sewer or down spouts going into the sewer. A lot of it is unintended inflow, so it's cracks in pipes or joints underground. And what our community sees, much like many others, is that when we have a high rainfall amount, the volume that goes through our Ward Road pump station pretty much doubles. So it adds strain to the system, and we are paying to clean, treat water that doesn't need to be treated. So that's something that we're required by our administrative consent order through DEP and pressure through regulation to make improvements on over the next few years. And then the last piece of the puzzle, or last big piece of the puzzle, is the causeway portion of the force main. So from Ward Road to the Rotary. I'm going to hold there. Tom, do you want to add anything?
No, that's a great summary. I would just say that, the Ward Road pumping station, when you retained us for engineering, there's the failure on the Linway. And, that was the mission critical. But after we started to do the work and do the engineering for the Linway, we got to look more into that pumping station. And that pumping station on Ward Road is probably one of the town's most critical assets. If that fails, you're really in a bad situation. And we did go there, and just for anybody who's online, the building itself is in, the structure of the bones, the brick and the concrete are not bad, but just about every electrical motor control center, the pumps, HVAC, everything is given it everything that it could, but it's just time. There's really no more Band-Aids. And the fact that it is such a critical asset for the town is it really does need to be addressed. And then going back to what you had said, Tony, on the state's intended use plan for state revolving fund. Yeah, they receive hundreds of projects, and then they crop them down to just the most worthy projects, and they rank them. And I think Nahant, these projects were listed in the top 10 of all the state projects, and it's great because you get first picks. But the fact that you scored that high is because they're aware of, the need to do this work. So it's the state recognizes that that infrastructure needs to be taken care of.
That's a great point.
So I have a two-part question.
Yes. Yeah.
On the Ward Road Pump Station project, I understand that there's a contingency there to factor in, unknowns. Could we get an update on what the contingency amount is? The second part of the question is, can we get a project report, mid-project or something, to let us know how we're doing, and say if we're gonna, come in under 5.32 million, if there's gonna be, say, some left, that can be rolled into the next project, correct? Or we just won't borrow as much.
So the 5.32, I can answer the second part. The question, there was two questions, Tom. Could you hear them?
Yeah, yep, I heard both. Yep.
All right. So the second question was the 5.3. So that's an estimated amount. So this will go out to bid. So it's possible that, the proposals that we receive are not 5.32 million. If they're less than that, then that's how it'll be based on the procurement and the contract. So, right. So whatever that total amount is, whether it be lower or higher than 4.32, it'll shift the allocation for the other projects. The all in, we have 18 million approved by the town. The DEP has told us that, so I mentioned earlier in the IUP, the town was awarded 16.2 something million. When we spoke with them, they said, go for 18 from the town. It's easier for us to increase our award and give you more borrowing. It's harder process for you to go to town meeting and get the approval. So I'm sure if the number fluctuated higher, they would either say, okay, we're not going to change your total amount. But as we got to that, as we started reaching to the top of the 16.2, they would increase our award amount based on the project, the procurement of any of those projects. And Tom, do you want to answer the contingency question?
Yeah. Yep. So, if this project was going out like that, if we put this out to bid maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we would probably estimate it to be like a $3.5 to $4 million pumping station rehab. The prices that we're seeing now for similar type of pumping stations, right, are, anywhere between 4 and 4.3, very similar to your station. So, we would still need to design it and then, put it out to bid. So there's a time frame. And, what we're seeing is it's the material costs are just going, everybody can see it, escalation in that. And then there's such a volume of work out there right now with, for general contractors, this job, we would probably expect, a couple of years ago to get 6 to 8 bidders on a job like that, but a lot of them are so busy. We're going to have to really, make sure that it's out there, advertise it as a great project, and make sure we get 4 bidders for some competition. But there was a pumping station we just did down in Barnesville. There was 1 bidder. It's like that's how busy they are. So with that in mind, you can see how we escalated for contingency from a 4 to 4.3. We're giving us, a year's worth of escalation, and really, fortunately, the location for Nahant is a lot better than Barnstable. So you're going to get some interest in something like that.
Thank you, Tom.
Any other questions on the phone? All right, we'll move on. Thank you, Tom. Another article featured, Article 20 on the warrant, is for a fire truck for the fire department. The cost of this fire truck is in the 700,000 range. It's a big purchase for any community. The town of Nahant, however, you should know that the town of Nahant hasn't spent, $1 on fire apparatus since 1976, and largely due to our current chief, Chief Antrim, for all of his work getting grants, federal funding to pay for new fire trucks. And we have, for our size community, for the density of our housing, we're required to have 3. And we have 2, less than 5-year-old new trucks. The third, however, is very old and in need of replacement. So the article you'll see is to only borrow about half of the cost. That's because of those ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act, money that every town received. We can use it towards this type of purchase. So we would actually fund the balance out of that funding that we received in the form of a grant from the federal government. So, for this article, it's important to know that, for the town of Nahant, for our size town, to only have to really spend, our own money on half of a truck out of the 3 that we have, this is a really good, story for us, but it does come at a cost. $350,000 is certainly a big ask as well. This Article 22 is community preservation. So this chart has a list of a number of different CPC projects that were approved by the Community Preservation Committee. There's, as I said, they're all listed here. I'll just touch on a few of them. 22 F, technical assistance to develop a housing plan, is a very important one for the town of Nahant. We are facing an issue regarding compliance with Chapter 40B affordable housing requirements. We're also going to be facing some sort of requirement of multifamily zoning because we're an MBTA community. We're still waiting to see that guidance. And the town has many housing needs, whether it be affordable housing for elderly or seniors on the fixed income, or providing housing for new young families that currently can't afford to move to Nahant. So we have a number of housing needs in town that we really, and plus we have the pressure of these requirements that we really need to bring in a consultant and develop this plan so that we can accomplish those goals. 22G, acoustic and lighting ADA improvements in the town hall. You will see on Saturday, especially with the number of fans going and air purifiers, that hearing anything in the town hall can be quite difficult, even for those who have excellent hearing. We brought in a consultant that recommended improvements that would help with the sound quality of the town hall and lighting quality too. Lighting quality that would improve the lighting, but also revert our fixtures back to something that's more historically accurate with the original lighting in the town hall. 22H, this is this was featured last year as well. We actually went out to bid. The projects came back higher than expected. So we're coming back to town hall, coming back to town meeting for the additional funding so that we can program all the items in the procurement and get all these necessary exterior improvements completed at the library and the town hall, plus make improvements to the wall, the cemetery wall archway, the entryway to the Green Lawn Cemetery. Little Nahant Playground, additional funding for Little Nahant Playground. There's, this playground is the only recreation and open space available really adjacent to Little Nahant. We've had a number of meetings with the neighborhood, working with a playground consultant. This funding would help us improve that playground. It also comes with funding for planning for the other playgrounds around town. So we can actually take a look at, what is going to be needed in the other playgrounds in the upcoming years, put that plan together, and in future years, come back to the town for funding for those projects. And there's a number of other ones there. I'll just I'll hold for a second if anyone has any questions on any of the other CPC projects. All right, I'll move on. Another big issue for the town is our police, our police station, our fire station, much like the town hall, the library, the school, the DPW building, the sewer infrastructure. A lot of our buildings have exceeded their, expected lifespan. The police station is an old school building that actually used to be on the Green Lawn Cemetery and moved over to its current location. The fire station is an old army building converted, same like the DPW. So these are very old buildings that don't meet our current needs, constantly require, upgrades or Band-Aids, however you want to call it. And honestly, eventually the town needs to start thinking long-term about both of these items. So this, using free cash, we would start the first phase of really studying the future of these buildings. So whether that be, 2 new buildings, 1 new combined building, where they, both or one would be located, what needs for each department are necessary, all those things would be featured in a feasibility study. It's a very public process. Eventually, multiple options would be presented to the town. And, if we find one to be the best solution, we would then come back to the town in the future for funding for design. So this is, this isn't design, this isn't construction. This is the very first step of studying. And, using this free cash for it is a good use of those funds instead of borrowing for something that, we don't know what the solution is yet. Just for the study, this is a good way of using that money. Article 29. So Article 29, Article 30, and Article 31 are all related to climate change, whether it be on the preparation side or on the recovery side. And these are my last 2 slides here. So we're almost done. And then we'll open it up if anyone has questions. But Article 29, I have pictures here on the slide that talk about short beach dune improvements. We have a number of coastal properties that are in desperate need of improvements to whether it be on resiliency or preparedness for climate change. So as we know that sea level is going to continue to rise and significantly over the next 25, 50, 100 years, We need to start preparing our town for that. This year, there is a huge influx of federal money going into federal and state offered grant programs. And they are looking for, shovel ready projects, design projects, a number of different things that they're eager to fund. In fact, they just reduce, all those grant programs usually require a local match. Typically, that local match is 25%. So for every dollar we put in, they put $3. They've just, on 2 of the grants that we're targeting, they just reduced it to 10%. So for instance, the Short Beach project, which would be increasing the height of the Short Beach Dune and improving the entry and exit points, the access points of the beach. We're applying for a federal grant for $3,250,000, a very large project. If funded, our 10% would only be $325,000. So if this grant passed, if this Article 29 passed, when we apply for the grant in June, we can actually check off in the application process that we already have our local funding appropriated or approved or authorized, which gives us extra points in the competitiveness of the application review process. Literally points, all these applications are reviewed, they're given points. You get extra points for already having the local match approved. And so this article is carefully worded that it can only be used for that type of purpose. For the local match of a large grant project related to climate change or technical assistance related to, the application of that grant. This is kind of a new way of thinking for our community, for many communities, of just getting the approval so then you can go and, use that as an aid in these application process. So, this is a very important one, for us, especially in this area of Short Beach. That Nahant Road's our main road in and out of town. And when flooded, we get, not only are we cut off from the mainland in Lynn and can't get over the causeway, but folks in Little Nahant are cut off from Big Nahant. Our emergency vehicles can't get through the flooded streets. It's a big issue. So by increasing the height of the dune, we actually can potentially prevent flooding in future storms. It's not the only project that, we're also applying for grant funding for other properties around town, 40 Steps, Tudor Beach, Doggy Beach, Willow Road revetment by the golf course, a number of different projects.
Tony, question about this?
Yes.
The Short Beach Dune preservation effort here, does that include fortifying the life-saving station and the garage there? Because those are kind of in the danger zone of that kind of flooding.
That would definitely be, the question was, how does the Short Beach project take, I'm summing up, but take into account the issue of the life-saving station? So certainly the garage at the life-saving station has been identified as an issue because it sits on the dune. There's a couple different alternatives that we could consider, whether we are fortifying, a revetment around the garage, building the dune kind of around that. If we're lifting the garage, if we're moving the garage a little bit, closer to Nahant Road and away from the dune, obviously those are huge, costly projects. It'll come down to, the design phase, what's permittable and what the town, wants to do. So it's definitely identified as an issue. Eventually, if we don't do something or start thinking about it, eventually the garage is gonna fall, into the beach.
Guys,
So,
Tony, can I ask a question?
yes,
I'm not sure how to phrase it, but as I look at this, I see the potential for large capital expenditures over the coming years. And my first inclination is it premature or even feasible to start considering a potential enterprise fund to sit back and so we can monitor and control and manage? Because this is going to require a substantial outside fund. And it scares me to think that we're going to just currently would do it all through general funding, through our general fund and property taxes. And this looks bigger than that. So I think that's my question.
this article will be a borrowing. But that only answers your question for this specific article. I think what you're asking is more of like long-term. How are we going to sustain like the local costs associated with these projects? Even if we go for grants, there'll be a local match required, and how are we going to pay for that?
Yeah, this looks like it's this isn't a one and gone. This isn't a one-off. This is something that I don't know, at least to me, my way of thinking, I wonder if we shouldn't structure how we manage it going forward, because I don't think this is a one-off situation. Just an observation.
Certainly. That's why we're borrowing. That's why we're asking for the authorization to borrow, because we don't have a definitive funding source for our local side. I'd be interested in talking with you about it, Jeff. What type of enterprise, and what would the funding source of that be? And, what would be the estimated, revenue stream on that? But it's definitely a long-term issue for the town that, then again, you might be forced into borrowing for your local match, which, if it's only 10%, that's not bad. 10% of the project, that's not bad. But obviously you're going to have to pay that debt down over time. So, how are you going to pay for that? So it's a good question, and it's more of a long-term thought process that I'd be happy to chat with you about.
After the town meeting, I'll talk to you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. Amy, are you on?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Amy Rutledge from Dubois and King is our project manager for the lowlands drainage issues. We're paying Dubois and King with the funds that were appropriated at last year's town meeting. And essentially what their job is to look at the lowlands neighborhood, look at the stormwater issues that are occurring there, that occur after large storms, and present alternatives or multiple solutions, and a capital plan that, the town can attack and improve, the relief of when these storm floods occur. This year, like last year, a citizen petition was submitted to the town. It's article number 31. As you can see, I summed it up a little bit, but basically it's 400,000 to repair, restore, improve drainage in the lowlands by replacing, repairing, constructing the existing Castle Road storm drain and installing a permanent fixed pump. The town has put its own article in, Article 30, for $550,000 to fund drainage improvements in the lowlands neighborhood generally consisting of Castle Road, Fox Hill Road, and Ward Road, including but not limited to improvements to existing infrastructure of drainage ditches, stormwater pipes, and outfalls, as well as development of infrastructure to improve drainage. The two big differences between the town's article and the citizen petition is money, the amount of money. We have more in the town article, and the language. Our Article 30 is worded broadly so it can consider, any and all of the solutions that the engineers are currently looking at. We found that, Article 31 is targeting one certain solution, which, we haven't really fully evaluated yet with Amy and her team. They're going through that process now. I would say that, our hope is that Article 30 passes and then Article 31 can be withdrawn. Our hope is that Dubois and King has completed their assessment by the end of June. And then if this is approved, we can start spending money July 1st and start, targeting the solutions that they identify. Basically what you could think of what they're doing is they're developing a model of the lowlands neighborhood, and they are basically saying, where does the water go when storms, surge over the dunes and flood this area? And how much water fills up what area, what spot, and then what solutions, stormwater solutions, could be implemented, and how would they improve the relief from that flooding? So the pictures on the bottom left are from March 2018. You can see that, that was an extreme situation, but you can see that the entire lowlands neighborhood was flooded, including, the two very critical assets of the Ward Road pump station and the National Grid substation, electrical substation. And in the picture on the left, kind of in the back, you can see in the distance, the golf course at Bear Pond being flooded as well. When this area floods, you have the town's two very critical assets are in this neighborhood, a number of residential properties, and, it cuts off the town from the mainland and from Little Nahant. So, improving the stormwater drainage issue in this part of town, obviously has immediate impacts to the people who live there, but it has immediate impacts to the entire community as well. It's important for our entire town. Amy, do you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Tony. You did a good job of summing it up. I'll just say that the graphic there on the right shows the initial options we are looking at restoring the outfall on the Castle Road neighborhood, which is not functioning right now. Basically what's going on in that neighborhood, it seems that pipes may be undersized and potentially sloped incorrectly. So we're right now in the process of looking at all of the existing data, getting some survey information, performed our site investigations. And so besides that, restoring that outfall, we're also looking at whether or not improvements to the drainage channel along that heritage trail through to Bear Pond will help the situation. And then we're doing something at Bear Pond where there's currently pumps working, if there's any improvements that can be done there to help alleviate flooding. And then the other fourth item is is a solution that we haven't technically come up with because we're still evaluating data, but it could be a combination of improvements to the overall drainage system and or potentially a new stormwater feature for storage and pumping to alleviate flooding. And so that's where we're at right now. And as Tony said, we're going to be coming up with some recommendations over the next month and a half.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
So I will, let's open it up for any questions or comments related to this subject. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any.
This is Vi Paddock. I have a question.
Hi, Vi.
Hi, how you doing? Great job, Tony. This is great.
Thank you.
So I understand that in the past, kind of where it says restore outfall over there on Castle Road, not far from the Nahant Road, there used to be a bridge and the water flowed in and out naturally long ago. I think Mark Cullinan knows about this spot. So it kind of looks like maybe that's the same area. Maybe there could be a one-way flow there. Just a comment on that. And then the other one is I've discussed this with somebody, and I'm not too sure I understand the reply, but this, where the ball fields are there at Nahant Road opposite Short Beach. And then just a little bit by the parking area, there's all this sort of a wasteland of trees and stuff like that. It used to be a pond. And I think I understand from the old timers, since I'm a newcomer, that even the ballpark was actually a wetland. So I'm kind of asking the question is, if you hollowed some of that out, could it contain more water to reduce the depth in the lowlands?
I'll let Amy follow up on this. I think, in the lowlands, the elevation of the ground in the lowlands is only, maybe a foot or so above sea level. So, if you dig a hole in the backyard of any of those, or even in the ball field, you get a foot down, you hit water already. So there's a limitation on how much, I think, stormwater capacity there is in a new basin. But that is definitely one of the things that Amy and her team are looking at as one of those, as she mentioned, the fourth potential solution that we, of new infrastructure that we don't currently have, that could potentially create, some stormwater capacity that we could pump from, similar to how we do on the other side of town at Bear Pond. It'd be like a mini Bear Pond on this side as well. But Amy, do you want to add to that?
Sure. I will say that we have looked at historic photos and maps that were provided by one of the residents, and also some available online data and maps, and did see where the lowlands largely used to be wet, a massive wetland complex through there, even where the homes are. And so there is like Tony was saying, the groundwater is pretty high there. So there would be limited storage capacity, but it doesn't mean it can't be an option to provide a storage area to some extent. Whether that's restoring some of the wetlands in that area, but noting that the groundwater is already really high, so there's not a whole lot to work with in that area, but we are exploring that option.
Yeah, so the same is true with Bear Pond. So the way I understand it, Bear Pond used to be a whole lot bigger. So if it were larger, if it were enlarged, maybe some of the other wet areas in the golf course, I mean, is it the same situation? The water table is just so high that even if you expanded them as bigger bowls to hold more water, it wouldn't really be significant.
Yeah, and that's something we can look at too. It all depends on which direction we want the water to go into, of course. That will play a factor in. And there's not much wiggle room for Bear Pond too because of the golf cart course, but
Well, I mean, if it comes to the point of people's homes and the welfare of the town, you know, maybe some of the golf course could be sacrificed for holding water as a reservoir.
right, yeah, and we look at the areas with the least constraints first and then work our way to areas that have more constraints. You know, we'll assess all the areas and consider constraints that are existing.
Thank you, Vi and Amy. Any other questions? Okay, if not, then I will just open it up for any question or comment on, you know, anything that we didn't get to touch on. As I said, there are a number of other articles in the warrant. I tried to highlight some of the larger ones. If you go to nahant.org, let me see. If you go to nahant.org and you click on the top banner, annual town meeting, it'll bring you to this page. We created this page to help explain the process of town meeting, but also provide additional information. You can see, you know, what citizen petitions were submitted, Community Preservation Committee projects, the Board of Selectmen budget and warrant. The Advisory and Finance Committee report is available here, which is also in hard copy, you know, at your home. And then we have a ton of additional information, you know, by article here in this last box as well. So a ton of information online as well, if you want to take a look at any of that stuff. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have any question or comment. Okay, well, hopefully we'll see you on Saturday. Like I said, check-in starts at 11:30, and we'll see you then.
Hey, Tony, it's Michelle. Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So, could you clarify the article related to the funding transfer that's going to happen for the tennis courts at Flash Road? And just also clarify what processes need to happen related to that?
So there's Article 1 has to do with transferring funds within the current fiscal year. There's a movement, an effort in town by a group of folks who are, you know, looking to change the current plans for the tennis and basketball court. What's left basically to do on that project is lay down paint. So they've asked we've received a quote from the current contractor on what it would cost to accomplish, what they want to do, which is make dedicated pickleball courts of one half of the tennis courts. So instead of doing 2 tennis courts shared with 2 pickleball courts laid on top, the proposal would be to have, half of that space dedicated to 4 pickleball courts and the other half, a sole tennis court. The
So-
project.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and I'll ask my follow-up question.
So the project would have been done last year, but because of the specs on the paint requiring 50-degree weather, it got too cold to put paint down last year. So they're due to come back to paint the courts, now essentially, because now that the weather's gotten better, but they're aware that this issue, might come up at town meeting, that there might be a change order. So they're waiting to hear from us after Saturday. The goal has always been to have the projects done and open for the first week of July when Park League starts. You can't go to, if you're going to make a change, you can't use fiscal year 23 funds because those don't become available until July 1st. And the project is going to get done before then. So the only way to fund a change order would be to use current fiscal year funding. So that's why it's Article 1. Now, it's not listed there because Article 1 is transfers. It becomes talked about on the floor in the form of the motion. Now, the Finance Committee will stand up and make a motion of, what transfers they're looking the town to approve. They may or may not include the motion, in the motion, funding for this effort. They're meeting tomorrow night to speak with they're having a public meeting tomorrow night. That'll be discussed. Certainly during town meeting, any registered voter has the ability to stand up and make an amendment on the floor to any motion. So either it could be included in the Finance Committee's motion, or, someone could stand up on town meeting floor and amend any motion. So there's 2 different ways it could be presented, so to speak.
And is the plan, will there still be a basketball court?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a basketball court, a tennis court, and pickleball, depending on the configuration between tennis court and pickleball, correct?
Yes.
And how much is the additional cost for the change?
So, if we were just to do paint, and basically use temporary netting for the pickleball side, it was only about like $8,000 or something like that. To come in and actually install permanent poles for permanent nets, it goes to 19 grand. And I understand that the folks, that are pushing on this effort have actually, done some private fundraising as well.
Okay. So anywhere between 9 and 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's,
if I say, this is Sandy Burton.
Yeah. Can you hear Sandy? Sandy's actually here.
yes, can you hear Sandy? Hi.
A few others are trying to organize this change. So the quote that Tony said was 19,000 to have 4 dedicated pickleball courts and 1 dedicated tennis court. And through efforts of Deb Baldwin, Cora Lang, and Dave Aldrich, we've raised $7,600 to date to help co-fund this change to the plan. So this is also what was done in Marblehead, but we want this configuration because we feel that there's a majority of people in town that would benefit from it. And with our older population getting older, it will be a greater use. Certainly this sport is played by many people, but certainly by older.
Hi, Tony.
Hold on one second, Pam.
Sorry.
One second,
We've
Pam.
done a lot of fundraising, and we hope to bring a little bit more in before the town meeting. So the plan is to try to fund 50% of this additional cost.
All right, Pam, go ahead.
Hi, Pan Manatee, 122 Wilson Road. I've talked to some of the people involved with the fundraising, and as I've said publicly, I'm all for pickleball. But as a homeowner in Nahant since 2004, with 3 children ranging from 16 to 7, there are a lot of families and children who have been waiting to use those recreational facilities. And town meeting has voted twice in approval of tennis courts and basketball courts. To make this last minute change, I think is really unfair to the 3,500 people that live in town. But that's not to say that I don't support having pickleball courts there. I absolutely support having pickleball courts there, but I don't support having one whole tennis court lost permanently to all of the other people in town who could actually use that for tennis. What I propose is to have lines drawn for 2 courts on each of the tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts on each of the tennis courts, so that it's fair to everyone. So the pickleball contingency can have their 4 courts, but the one tennis court is not permanently lost to the use of the other residents and families in town.
All right, thank you, Pam. So I think, you know, I've generally outlined what, you know, might come up at town meeting, and you've heard from both sides. You know, town meeting is the place to, you know, voice your opinion and vote on one way or the other. Michelle, are all of your questions answered?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so like I said, tomorrow night, the finance committee meets. I'm sure, you know, folks from both sides are gonna, you know, discuss this issue with the finance committee. And, you know, I'm sure it's gonna be something that comes up at town meeting, you know, under Article 1. I'm gonna try, I think there's some confusion about what the current configuration is, and, you know, kind of floating out there too. And I'll try to put something together tomorrow to provide the finance committee ahead of, you know, their meeting, so that at least, you know, the conversation is, you know, everybody's kind of working off of the same, understanding. So it's smooth, but, you know, certainly there's folks on both sides of the issue, and we'll see how it goes. Anyone else? All right, yes, Michelle, I see your chat. That's what I'm gonna, if you go down to the Flash Road Park, there's a sign, like you could drive by and just pull right up. There's a sign there that shows a picture of what the current proposal is. I have that digitally. I also have, you know, what the change order proposal is digitally. I just need to, you know, put them on the same sheet so that, you know, it's easy for people to see kind of what's being discussed. So I'll work on that tomorrow.
If I could respond to the second question regarding the reservation system. Marblehead uses a reservation system that works quite well. The pickleball committee would like to implement a similar type system. So people would reserve both tennis and pickleball.
Oh, okay.
Online
All right.
in advance.
Okay, so let's see here. So yeah, so a couple questions came in on the chat about reservation system. Sandy, who's sitting here, read that and said, you know, that the folks who are, you know, the pickleball players are in favor of something like that. Certainly we'll see, you know, comes down to how this ends up after town meeting.
Hey, it's Michelle again. One
Yes.
thing to note, I think the reservation system sounds fantastic. But if that's a cost that's not built into fully funding this, then you need to add that additional cost. Unless
Right.
the pickleball group will pay for the additional software and gift it to the town.
Right. Yeah, we'd have to figure, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we don't know what the final, you know, plan is gonna be. But, you know, certainly it sounds like there's support for it, so we'll see how it goes, but you're right, it would be, I'm sure it wouldn't be a free software. I would prefer it be something that is on like the Nahant.org website, and, you know, we'd have to figure something out.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be integrated with all the digital assets that the town holds.
Yeah, and you know, it's something that it almost starts, you know, knocking on the door of all of our recreational facilities and, you know, being better organized and coming up with a better way of managing it. So, you know, that's something that, you know, the town is going to want to look at, you know, in the future anyways too, so. How many tennis courts to pickleball courts there
Marblehead,
in Marblehead?
I don't know. Maybe 1 by 30. Well, people might know. People,
We'll try and find out before tomorrow night's meeting.
big, main area.
Try to find out before tomorrow night's meeting. Okay.
Sandy,
Yeah.
Yes.
there are six pickleball courts, 1 tennis court at the middle school in Marblehead.
All right.
I give you.
Thank you. All right, well, dress warm, or dress for the warmth on Saturday. We'll try to make it as comfortable as possible and hope to see everybody there.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks, Tony. Nice job.